Alright, so I'm going to walk you guys through the difference of the swirl port step, I think some people call it. This guy right here. How it kind of leads up and then drops off. And the difference between most LS engines and the LS7 in particular. So the LS7 has, you can't see it here because I removed it in the name of flow, but this step here is on the inside of the port. So the port comes in here and it tends to hug the outside, right, the mass momentum, and that creates swirl. Now on the LS7 head, I've removed it, but rather than being here, that step is here. So why the difference? Why take it from this side and put it to this side? Putting the step on the inside actually promotes swirl, because as the air is coming in and flowing across the outside of the valve guide, if this isn't here, they're gonna basically, the air coming around it is gonna collide and come out straight. If you lift this up, then it's going to allow the air to come in behind it and get more swirl. Now on the LS7 heads, the step is on this side, and the intention of that is anti-swirl. They're trying to slow down the swirl. And the whole reason for the step is to create what's called tumble. Okay, so there's two different mixing strategies in an engine. Swirl goes like this around the axis of the cylinder. Tumble is perpendicular. It goes like this inside the cylinder. So when you have that step, whether it be here on normal LS heads or here on the LS7s, it's going to drop off and create a tumble as it comes through the valve. Okay? So what's interesting is that most LS heads have a tumble step. That's what this is intended for. It helps atomize, it creates a little turbulence, helps mix the fuel coming in with the air, and you know, it does help with cold starts. It helps with idle and drivability. You know, most of that is in the tune, but there's a reason, you know, in the motorsports world we do things a certain way, but in the OEM level engineering world, which I've been in up until recently 7 years, you're willing to give up peak performance for emissions, mileage, a smoother calibration. Your average person wants something that's seamless. If you're on this video, it's because you're not that kind of person. So typically what we do is, to get more air into the engine, we remove these things. You know, we trim down around the guide, we pull out what they call the swirl step. At least that's how I've heard of it. But as opposed to your typical LS engine, looking at an LS7, that step is on this side. So what that does is it actually slows the swirl down. So what ends up happening is, if you remove this, it's a little harder to tune at idle and drivability, but you have a larger throat diameter and you can ultimately get more air into this engine. So this particular head is a TFS 265X. It is a CNC ported head, but I have gone further and smoothed the chambers, ported the heads, removed the anti-swirl step. So it might be a little more difficult for the idle tuning, but you know, tuning's my thing, so I'm not worried about it. It's going to make more peak power. Under the curve, you might lose a little bit down low, but This is going on a 442 cubic inch stroked LS7. That should make right around 700 at the crank, naturally aspirated. So that was why I chose to remove that here. It's pretty common practice to remove it in the smaller ports, the LS ports here. That's basically, people call it a swirl edge or a swirl step. It's more like a tumble step. So what happens is, as the flow comes off of here and this flow is rolling around here, it collides with it. When it drops, it creates this motion, a tumble effect. And it helps atomize the fuel in the air. So there's a reason for it. In the name of performance, you get rid of it. Now go to the LS7 head, big ports, big valves. You get rid of this, the gains aren't as large as getting rid of it over here. So, you leave that in there, you can really improve upon kind of your throttle response and things like that. But what I found is, in the tuning, you could make up for that. So if you're going for peak power and the highest gains, you get rid of that. Otherwise, if you want, a mild cam, nice drivability, you would not want to remove the quote-unquote anti-swirl edge, which is on the outer, which is where the mass momentum of the air hugs the outside of the port as it comes in. They make it tumble as it's coming into the cylinder. Whereas here, you allow it to come in and swirl, max swirl, and then the little bit of air here that enters drops down and helps kind of break up that swirl. So, choose your poison. There's a lot of different methods to it. That's just my explanation of the two variants. I mean, you can go a lot of different ways. This is only my, third or fourth set of LS7 heads to do some real testing on. Prior to this, I left the quote-unquote anti-swirl edge in there. Now I'm testing with it out for the first time. We'll see how rough it is as far as the idle and the drivability. I think I can tune it out. It won't be an issue. My biggest concern is losing some of the low-end throttle response. Whether it's, I don't think it's going to hesitate. I just think it might not be there, as quick off the throttle. Either way, it's going to be a monster. Should be fun. And these heads are going to get a nice little pocket port and put on a 1,000 wheel horsepower 5.3 engine, boosted, in an old Datsun. So that'll be a good time. Anyways, appreciate you, chiming in and listening to what I have to say. Feel free to comment below and contradict what I'm saying. A lot of the knowledge that I've gained through this swirl port tumble edge, as opposed to the anti-swirl tumble edge, has been through some pretty in-depth conversations with my good friend Brian Tooley himself. So anyways, I appreciate your guys' time, and until the next video, take care.